that next page.
The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 8, printed in House Report 111-370, offered by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Stupak, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 8, printed in House Report number 111-370, offered by Mr. Stupak of Michigan.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 98, the nays are 330. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 9, printed in House Report 111-370, offered by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Stupak, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 9, printed in House Report number 111-370, offered by Mr. Stupak of Michigan.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 150, the nays are 279. The amendment is not adopted. The committee will be in order. Members are asked to take their conversation outside the chamber. The committee will be in order. Purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to the authority granted to me under the rule, I offer amendments en bloc.
The clerk will designate the amendments en bloc.
Amendments en bloc offered by Mr. Frank of Massachusetts, consisting of the amendments numbered 11, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 27, 28, 34, and 25, printed in House Report number 111-370.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Massachusetts and a member opposed will each control 10 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, these are 10 amendments that range in merit from wonderful to at least acceptable, and I will be reserving the balance of my time, and I will yield time, or they can get their own time, to any one of the offerers who wishes to explain his or her amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll claim time in opposition.
The gentleman will suspend. There shall be order in the House. Members shall take the conversation away from the chamber. There shall be order in the House. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to claim time in opposition, even though I'm not opposed.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield myself such time as I may consume to speak on the 5 amendments that I offered in Rules Committee that were made in order under the rule. The first, Burgess Amendment number 5, to strike orderliness, the word orderliness, on the list of descriptors of Title I's definitions of the duties of the Council. In the language of the underlying bill, there is no explanation for what orderliness means in financial parlance. Without the word defined, without that word, this section still has power, and what this amendment would do is remove a word that seems nebulous without a common understanding. Second Amendment number 7, index systemic dissolution fund amounts to inflation. In the language of the underlying bill, the section creating the Systemic Resolution Fund indexes the amount to inflation, whereas any mitigatory action imposed by the Council involving the sale, divestiture, or transfer of more than $10 billion in total assets by a financial holding company subject to a stricter set of standards does not. This amendment would index those amounts. Amendment number Burgess number 11. The metrics of what determines significantly undercapitalized will be determined by rule or regulation. In the language of the underlying bill, Title I pretends to elaborate on what significantly undercapitalized means, but in its definition, it neither gives a fixed dollar amount, a ratio, or even a formula. Without a specific metric, this definition is left too much to individual interpretation, just like on page 494 of the bill, where substantial net provision requires a specific definition by rulemaking. Significantly undercapitalized should be defined in rule or regulation. And I would further point out that the very next section of the bill gives the term significantly critically undercapitalized, and under critically undercapitalized there is in fact reference to at least a ratio at another part of the bill. Significantly undercapitalized is never adequately defined, and I am concerned about the effect of unintended consequences if we do not provide that definition. Burgess number 14, the outer limit of 2 years on the amount of time the Federal Reserve has to do their audit. During the financial services markup, Representative Paul offered an amendment which was accepted 43 to 26. This amendment is generally reflected in Title I, Section 1000A, which allows for the auditing of the Federal Reserve, and it shall be completed as expeditiously as possible. My amendment seeks to put an outer time limit on the amount of time which can pass or otherwise be defined as expeditiously as possible. An audit by the IRS for an individual usually does not take very long. In fact, the IRS has 3 years to audit an individual if there is not a substantial omission or if there is no tax fraud. In those cases, it would take 6 years. But the IRS is given so much time to do an audit because there are 143 million individual returns to examine. The Federal Reserve is different. Presumably, as a government agency, they wouldn't be as easy to audit as an individual because the government is supposed to have greater transparency, checking the Federal Reserve balance sheet of over $70 billion of assets. It should not take more than 2 years, simply for two reasons. We know who to audit, and we know what to audit. While I note the historic nature of even getting an audit of the Federal Reserve is in place, we cannot let the audit go on interminably, especially in times of financial crisis. We need to know what they have, where they have it, and I applaud Representative Paul for his laser-like dedicated focus to this issue, but this amendment would add an outer limit of 2 years on the amount of time that the Federal Reserve has to obtain that audit. Finally, Burgess number 8, strike the phrase "have engaged in information sharing" from the SEC revolving door study. In the language of the underlying bill, the definition of what or what is not information is not sufficiently evidenced so that if an employee of the SEC shares information as basic as the date of a meeting on a calendar, they would be considered a part of the SEC revolving door. This amendment proposes to get to the heart of the issue, which is to find those who have circumvented federal rules and regulations without bringing in those who have basic and non-essential information. I liken this to the innocent spouse provision in the IRS statutes. If someone just simply shares a page from an Outlook calendar, that does not make them or should not make them part of the revolving door, which we attempt to contain and restrain with the underlying language of the bill. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Murphy, the author of one of the amendments.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. My amendment very simply gets rid of an anachronistic law from 1933. Right now, it's illegal for banks to pay interest to business checking accounts. This adversely affects our small businesses and keeps them from building their business. Now, as we're fixing some of the issues we have with our regulatory system, is the right time to get rid of that. So my amendment would make it legal for banks to pay interest to business checking accounts. Wouldn't require it, but it would make it legal. This is the kind of common sense approach that's going to move us forward and help our small businesses get this economy going again. Thank you.
The gentleman reserves time.
Gentleman
from Massachusetts is recognized.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have no other speakers on my side, and we'll be prepared to close, which actually would be, I will yield back the balance of our time.
Does the gentleman yield back his time?
Yes.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I would just take this opportunity to announce if there are any members here who think we're going to do any further business, that we're not. And we will resume tomorrow morning. I will inform the members as a result of what we've been able to do with some of the manager's amendment and this on blocking, and I appreciate the cooperation of the gentleman from Texas and others. We have, I believe, 11 amendments left to be offered tomorrow. 2 of them will take a longer time. One on the CFPA, the Consumer Financial Protection Agency, one on the Republican substitute, and then there'll be a recommit. So we should be obviously finishing this bill sometime early tomorrow afternoon. We will come back in tomorrow and resume the debate, and I wanted members to know that. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is on the amendments en bloc offered by the gentleman from Massachusetts. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendments en bloc are agreed to. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Move the committee to now rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee rise. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
You're going to stand right here. Right there.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Speaker, the Committee of the whole House on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 4173, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chair of the Committee of the whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 4173 and has come to no resolution thereon.